from a Jaguars perspective, wins and losses, but the big win was they finally got rid of the GM. Trent Baalke is out officially Wednesday afternoon, January 22nd. So I think largely for most Jaguars fans, that was a big win here for you today.
3, 2, 1.
All right, and welcome in to Sub-Zero Sports Show. I'm your host today, Andrew Jupe. Thanks for coming in with us for an adventure here today. Had a good hair day going, so figured we might as well go ahead and throw down some knowledge. We'll talk some NFL today. What else we got going on? Maybe a little FSU basketball for our local flavor here in the Southeast, and also get into some picks here for the night, for the day, what we have going on. So should be a fun adventure for you here today. We'll start out in the NFL. Going to go with the head coaching search. Always a fun adventure this time of year as you go through the carousel, see what you have developing. Of course, coming at it from a Jaguars perspective here. That's the bias. That's the explicit bias, if you will. I feel like that should be essentially the name of the show here on the Sub-Zero Sports Network, whatever you want to call it. But from a Jaguars perspective, wins and losses, but the big win was they finally got rid of the GM. Trent Baalke is out officially Wednesday afternoon, January 22nd. So I think largely for most Jaguars fans, that was a big win here for you today. I think in the Baalke regime, it was, 23, saw the statistic, 24-43, so even worse. My mistake. So right about 36% win percentage here for the franchise. What does that mean? For every win, you have 2 losses. You put that into a season, and that's going to be not a lot of success. Not a lot of playoff appearances, and not a lot of long-term sustained success when you have those kind of operations. Always thought, to me, it was a little bit of a dud hire. They had a chance a couple of years ago to flip it and make a big splash, but they decided to keep Baalke, and then they went with Peterson, and that combination ultimately didn't play out. I'm not necessarily convinced that Peterson was the bad move or a bad move at coach, but you can only do so much with what you are given, and essentially thought the management up top of Peterson really handcuffed him. And so I think you see what you get when you have a team that made some interesting moves and was questionable and didn't really meet the needs in your draft. That's ultimately only you can do so much as a head coach when that happens. Obviously, look at some players like BTJ. He's going to be a huge success, and that's why I hope that the Jags can get this right. Get a combination of a general manager and a head coach that know what they're doing. You've got a limited shelf life on Lawrence. If you like ETN, you've got a limited shelf life on him. You've got some cool young players in the defense. You've got a little bit of opportunity. BTJ is a home run. If you can get some success with him on his rookie deal still, I think that's the goal. Basically, if you think Jacksonville and you're able to turn it around, either you are a person who can take over, make things happen, then I think that's your route. You have to show success because when BTJ comes around back again, he's looking for his second contract, which is the big one for wide receivers, right? If there's nothing desirable about Jacksonville, either you're going to have to unleash the bag to keep him around and basically lock him into this situation, if you will, or somebody's going to come in and snipe him as you're trying to perpetually rebuild, which it thinks Jacksonville is. Ultimately, that's what it kind of comes down to. I think Lawrence is still a quarterback in the NFL that you can have success with. You've got some offensive talent. You look at Kirk. I know he's a solid player when he's not injured, right? When he's healthy, he can do it. Same thing with Ingram, absolute baller. So you like the playmakers here on offense if people can stay healthy or if just the majority of them stay healthy. You know, you add a couple more pieces on the offensive line, but you look at players that you're getting success with overall for the Jaguars, you know, you have some deals. Cam Little, solid kicker. He's making under $1 million this year. Also making under $1 million. Rookie Jerry Jones, my boy from FSU, go Noles. of course, really developed down the stretch as a nice slot corner. So you've got some opportunity to build some pieces around. Are there holes? Absolutely. Do you need to address the offensive line? Absolutely. Is it fixable? I don't know. We'll see, right? That's why they get paid millions of dollars to figure those kind of things out. I think it's a franchise you can turn around. You get a couple good drafts. You try to make some trades. If you can get something in the next couple of years, because ultimately Houston's on the way up, and Houston kind of embarrassed Jacksonville the way that they did things. But you saw the blueprint. Clean house, bring people in, harness the franchise, get some good young players, actually use these draft picks, develop them, give them an opportunity to succeed, and now you can see what Houston's doing. Because ultimately, this is still a soft division. You look around the league, it's not the AFC North. You're not with Burrow and Jackson and the Ravens. You look over to the East, you're not having to deal with Buffalo and Dolphins, which are kind of up and down. They're kind of hit or miss. We'll see what they look like in a couple of years. And then you're not out west with the Chiefs and all those guys. The Broncos are really coming up. Nick seems to be kind of catching fire for Denver. They're going to be formidable down the stretch. Chargers are always kind of going to be in the conversation, it seems like, right on the fringe of that wild card. But it seems to me that they're kind of the third horse out there in the West. All that to say is Houston's had some success. I don't know if it's because of a successful franchise that Houston is, or just the void that the AFC South has created. Last couple years, Titans, dud. Colts, dud. Flashes with Richardson, but overall dud. Jaguars, dud. Going back to a couple years ago, that playoff appearance that they somehow got into the playoffs. But it's going to be an interesting ride. But the Jaguars, I think you saw them be exposed in this coaching process. So this couple weeks that you're looking for the head coaches, you're trying to harness that. You're trying to understand what's going on. You see that play out. You had 3 top candidates. They came in. There were problems. There wasn't alignment with the organization. And so you saw the 2 guys from the Lions, each signing head coaching jobs. And then you saw potential another candidate go back to his own team. It was so bad that the Bucs offensive coordinator Cohen goes back to Tampa to be his offensive coordinator. Of course, Detroit, those were the 2 kind of hot names, Glenn and Johnson. They're taking off for the Jets and Bears, respectively. One of them in division. Woo! That's tough. But I think you see kind of the problems with Jacksonville. And ultimately, it boils down to they didn't want to deal with Balky, or they couldn't deal with Balky. Instead, they're like, nah, Jacksonville, which is a potentially desirable destination, they decide to go off. But then you see the reactionary efforts from the franchise. They're like, man, none of these head coaches want to work with our general manager. Maybe that guy is not someone that we want to keep around, or not a baller that we think he is, that's tied with that San Francisco Super Bowl that he kind of limped into, right? That's not really the character that we have going on, and that's been drafting this team the last couple of years. So they finally, in Jags fashion, too little too late, filed the general manager after arguably the top 2 general manager candidates are now off the board. The top 3 head coaching candidates are now off the board. And so now you're dealing with the second cut, the second tier, and you're in the mix with the likes of the Cowboys. Who else is in there? Saints in the mix for this head coaching. Raiders, right? Squad, especially Cowboys and Raiders. Come on. And then I think you're fighting the Jets for the general manager candidates. So that's going to be super interesting. So their top 3 head coaching candidates out the door, and then you kind of go to that second tier. You look at it without Balky, if you can get a cooperative arrangement with the GM, with the head coach, this turns into a pretty desirable situation. Jags have $35 million in cap space, stuff to work with, like we talked about, young players still kind of in the mix. We talk about some of the deals that you have going on with some of these rookie deals, some of these younger players that we have coming along. And I think you could get a coordinator that could work with Lawrence and have kind of a re-renaissance, if you will, like Alex Smith, right? Everybody ruled him out, thought he was done, boom, kind of snaps back in here once you get a right environment. And if we can create a good environment, that's what I think ultimately is going forward. Don't necessarily need an offensive mind as a head coach. Would it help? Yeah, I think so. But ultimately, you're going to need some offensive people working with them on the daily to help build this franchise. And, maybe not trade away your best offensive line piece to the defending Super Bowl champions and dominant force in the AFC. As you see Robinson doing big things with the Chiefs. Come on, right? We want to be a run-first team, but we trade our best linemen. Okay, cool. So some head coaching candidates, looking at the list. It's tough to kind of formulate. You see a lot of guys tied in some tough scenarios. Florida's interesting here from the Vikings. It depends if you're looking for what exactly you're looking for, right? I think to me, those are kind of my lead dogs would be Flores or the guy Monken, I think. Monken over at the Ravens offensive coordinator. Those would be the two that I'm kind of looking at. I've heard, and then obviously going forward with, you think back to people's history, right? Kellen Moore, he's a hot ticket right now, of course, for the Philadelphia Eagles. He has ties to the Dallas organization. I've heard Jerry Jones is pretty infatuated with him. So going forward with that. So we'll see how that works out. But a couple of guys, I would love to have Saleh in here doing defensive work. If we get him in a D coordinator, I don't know if he would take that downgrade, but if we could get him in here on defense, get a nice GM, offensive-minded, good offensive coordinator, if the head coach is an offensive person, I think you're rolling. I think you got some potential to build this thing. But then you go over to the GM conversation, a lot going on there. So, kind of your top dogs that are floating around, you're probably looking at the assistant GMs for Tampa Bay and Denver, I think, are some of your hot tickets right now. Obviously, Spayek and Borgonzi, they've gone to the Raiders and they've gone to the Titans respectively. So these are the kind of next two in the conversation, with Mike Greenberg coming over from Tampa Bay, and then Darren, I think it's Mauge? Am I pronouncing that right? For the Broncos GM. So those are your kind of top dogs. Also sprinkle in, I liked Louis Riddick coming in from the broadcasting standpoint, obviously with former experience. I know he's kind of been in the media side of things the last couple of years, but the last time around when the head coaching search and the general manager position was in the mix, he was a name that was kind of thrown around that kind of lost steam. I'd love to bring him into the mix, see if he's a serious candidate and see what we could do there. Maybe that's what you need. Somebody who's different, who's got a new perspective and wants to make a lot of changes and can make a lot of changes. Because ultimately, Khan is hands-off as an owner. He's not getting in there. He's not Jerry Jones. So the burden with Jacksonville wasn't the ownership, it was the GM. But if you're bringing in a GM that's respectable and can conduct business and is a good facilitator and recognizes successes, that's the win. So the burden has come off. But the only thing is with Khan, he's not a micromanager. So when you have somebody bad, a lot of times what's happened in Jacksonville is they get a little too much runtime. They don't get the axe. So, you're only as good as your people. So if he's not bothering them, but your people aren't where they should be, you're not going to have successes. So I think that's the thing. So all that adding up, Jags pretty good positioning. Like I said, it's going to be Greenberg, Maui, Reddick. To me, are the top three. I know the media, they're reporting anybody that thinks they have ties with the Jaguars organization seems so far off. They said Ben Johnson was looking really good, but obviously the GM was a problem. Aaron Glenn was also in the mix, and then they really wanted, everybody was saying Cohen before he backed out. He went back to his assistantship with Tampa. He's like, no, these jokesters out here for these head coaching positions, these teams are terrible. I'm out of here. So understandably so, as we get forward to it. So that's kind of the NFL bit here. We have, obviously, Jaguars perspective we want to roll with. So we'll keep it in North Florida. Big basketball game going out west. Florida State University, the men's team traveling out to California here to take on the Golden Bears. Interesting matchup out there. Two games that Florida State will have out west. If they had the games here in Tallahassee, they probably would have gotten snowed out. The university is closed, little flash winter storm coming, which never happens, maybe once every 10, 12 years in Tallahassee. But they're out west, so the game will go on as scheduled. 9 p.m. Eastern tip-off should be a good one. Florida State coming in 7th in the conference. Cal on the other side coming in at 12th in the conference. And so both of these teams jostling for kind of that third, fourth tier in the ACC. And currently on the outside looking in. They're saying the ACC is going to get 5 to maybe 6 teams. SMU is kind of that fringe team right now. So both these teams are on the outside looking in. So this would be a big gettable game for them. As you look at California, I think they kind of mirror FSU. They go deep on the bench. They're not afraid to get in transition, both of which these two teams will be doing well. The size underneath, a little bit concerning for me for Cal. They've got two big weapons, including Port underneath there and Sissoko, who are down there making trouble. Also, they've got, I think, second leading scorer in the conference, Stojakovic, going. But he's been a little cold here recently. I don't know if it was just the road trip or the shooting struggles, but from deep and overall, it looked a little tentative. He drove early in that NC State game, and he got thrown out of the club by NC State, and he looked kind of tentative going forward after early in the game. FSU, a team that loves to rotate over, loves to smack it out of play and have the blocks with a high-pressure scenario. I think they can get Stojakovic. They get him early. The dangerous player I'm nervous about is Blackshear. So he can cutter, he can carve up a defense, can go both hands, and his distribution is going to be key. FSU sometimes leaves their shooters on an island on defense, and if you can knock down some trays, that's how you burn FSU. So the last couple games, they've been rotating, and they've created enough disruption. Teams haven't been shooting well. And so what that leads to, solid victories. But then you flip that to a couple games ago for FSU. They really got exposed with Clemson. They absolutely lit them up. FSU playing solid, though. Ewan has been getting it in. And then, of course, Bull Bowen, also the big man down low. And so I think you like the flow, what you see from FSU. And so as we get to later in the picks, I'm going to rock with FSU here tonight for this 2-game stretch, because I'm hoping the splits continue for Cal. So they had a homestand 2 weeks ago where they had both the Virginia teams. They had Virginia, Virginia Tech. They won one, lost one. And then they took a little road split, and they played 2 Carolina teams. They had UNC and NC State. They beat NC State, lost to UNC. So 1-1, 1-1 for each particular state. So they've got another homestand, this time with Florida State tonight and Miami this weekend. I'm hoping they can split right if they keep their law of averages. And if you were looking at the games, you, of course, would objectively say Miami, the more gettable team. So let's say Cal beats Miami this weekend, which would leave a loss opportunity for that trend continuing, where FSU is able to fill the void. So I'm with FSU, going to rock with them here as they head out west here for some more ball. So let's get into some other stuff that we had going on as we get into right before the picks. Of course, picks have been pretty hit or miss this week, sitting at 500 for the week as far as the college basketball scene goes. And heartbreaker earlier today, the game was moved up because of the winter storm situation down here in the Southeast. But gotta give some love to Georgia State. Maya Williams, Kaylee Addy absolutely broke my heart. Georgia State going off. Both of them averaging about 10.5 to 9 points apiece, but went absolutely ballistic. Both dropped 20 plus on the chance. You know, I love the Coastal Chaos rooting down there that they have going for the chance. They love the press. Thought they had it on the road. It was a little bit of a weird scenario with the new game time, but shout out Maya Williams. Came on big, 6 for 6 from deep, and had absolutely baller night or afternoon, I guess, with a 3 p.m. tip, way above her averages, points, rebounds, assists, absolutely dealing. Like we said, the threes burned Coastal Carolina, so I took a big L. So shout out to the Waxahachie, I think it is. Waxahachie and Atlanta natives, Williams and Addy slayed me there. So that was my L of the day. So shout out to Georgia State and the big win that they had here at home today on Wednesday, January 22nd. Going on down, let's get to some actual picks of stuff that has not happened yet here on the slate. So I look at it, Indiana at Northwestern. Northwestern favored by 3.5, a team that I like. Indiana also dealing with some injuries. Head coach Mike Woodson not confident about these injuries kind of coming back, so I'm liking Northwestern for that. Without Right now, he's, of course, still dealing with the knee that he had back in early January. And then Bryson Tucker still dealing with that finger. I like Indiana win healthy, but they're not. Northwestern is hot right now. Martinelli and the rest of the gang should have beat Michigan over the weekend. I look for them to bounce back at home, and they're favored. So, go on to the next game. It's a game of dogs here for the rest of the picks that we have here. It seems number 12 Texas traveling to TCU. Texas a little bit sleepy coming out of that game that they really should have taken care of Texas State, but it's a rivalry game. I get that. KJ Adams still injured with the shoulder. TCU came up big and they beat Baylor on the road, number 25 Baylor. So TCU at home is given 7.5 points. I think it's kind of a trap game here for Kansas. You think about the loss to Iowa State last week. They had the big win against Kansas State, obviously. Rivalry game, huge and emotional. And looking fast forward, they have a big game against number 7 Houston. Emotional games the last week or so. Played your rival, and then you have a huge matchup coming up early. This has all the feelings of a trap game. I'd take the points and TCU outright, and so I'm going to go with the Horned Frogs here tonight at home. Going down the list, next one we have another top 20 matchup here as newly ranked St. John's coming in at number 20 will host Xavier. Defensive battle it should be here tonight. I'm feeling the Musketeers. Once again, you look at the schedule and you think about all the chaos that St. John's has. Also, teams that we've been tracking here the last month or so, once they break into the 20s have been an absolute curse. The 20-plus curse. You get in, you get ranked, and then you lose almost automatically. It seems like a revolving door that has happened here lately. You think about Baylor even most recently and a couple other teams that we've looked at that just been – well, there they go. They were ranked, and now they're gone. So I got a feeling that Xavier comes in here. They're playing hot, and so I have them in the big city, taking it down with Coach Miller there. I'm liking what I'm seeing here from Xavier. Rolling on down the line, big one here in the SEC contest. They say they could get 12, 13, 14 teams in the tournament. We'll be the judge of that later on and when this election Sunday comes out. But an interesting one as UF, number 5, ranked Florida, traveling to South Carolina. So a little bit of an interesting one here. Once again, this has the feeling of a trap game to me. A lot of big contests going for Florida. You think about the next 3 weeks. I'm going to check out their schedule. What do they have coming up? They're going to play Georgia. Oh, yeah, Georgia was another team in that 25 curse. Georgia at Tennessee, number 6, versus Vanderbilt, who they want to get a revenge or they want to take down. They know they're up and up. Number 1, Auburn. Number 14, Mississippi State. Huge slate. And so you may not be thinking about South Carolina. Hit them on the road. I would take the points, 12.5, but I think I'm going to go South Carolina outright as well. Jamari Thomas, he's still out with the knee injury for South Carolina, but a lot of weird stuff going on with Florida. They've been weird ever since they had that big win against Tennessee early in the season. They've really been up and down. They should have lost to Arkansas, but Arkansas was terrible offensively. Texas, they missed their first, I think it was 9 out of 10 shots that they really kind of goose-egged. They've been weird. Their assistant coach, he has that sexual misconduct kind of case kind of floating around. The aura with the team is off. The performance has been sad on the court. I'm not rocking with Florida basically ever, obviously, with the FSU bias, but especially not now. They're a team that's going through a dangerous midseason slump, even though it may not look like it with only that bad loss to Missouri, which now that they're ranked may not be a bad loss, right? But something to consider here. So because of that, we're going to go with South Carolina, who's double-digit dog here tonight. Next game on the slate, talked about it, was FSU at Cal. FSU favored by 1.5. Going to go FSU. Think that that's appropriate, like their matchup, but think they have enough with the momentum they have going, their size and their pressure, though they will get a test. Ultimately, I think it comes down to Cal. Can they hit threes? If Cal is average or below average of threes, I think FSU wins. Pretty solid game. If they can shoot the lights out, it's going to get interesting. And then it's going to come down to FSU, what they have kind of in the next level. Are they able to execute, get through their stuff? FSU's a team, obviously, with the bias that I have that I like, but they're a blossoming team. They're in my Northwestern Xavier conversation that we have here. Teams that seem to be improving, but if the tournament started today, they would not be in. So they're kind of in that middle of the mix here that you could see sneaking into an 8-10 play-in conversation when we're talking mid to late March. So that's what I have going on with the Noles, of course, with Walker, Ewan, Bowen, all of them. So going down to the next one, highly ranked matchup. Don't steer away from the big games. It's going to be number 13 Texas A&M against number 16 Ole Miss. Ole Miss had some trouble rebounding. Not really sure what's kind of going on with them. They're kind of up and down. Texas A&M, Wade Taylor the fourth is back. So despite Texas A&M going on the road and Ole Miss being favored by 3.5, I like Texas A&M. Ole Miss seems to be kind of up and down, and so that concerns me a little bit. And I like the bolstered depth here for Texas A&M. And then I like Coach Buzz, what he does in general. So I'm subscribing to that as well. So as a recap, picks here, going down the list. We're going to go Northwestern over Indiana, TCU over Texas, Xavier over St. John, South Carolina outright to Florida, but if you can get the points, take them. FSU over California, and then Texas A&M over Ole Miss going forward here today. So pick them. If you've got disposable income, this is the best place to come because you're going to get it wrong if you listen to me. Of course, make sure to just absolutely destroy that commentary and blast off in the chats, but that's part of the Sub-Zero mentality. So enjoy, live with it. Got nothing for you. Take care.